"Are you sure?" the registrar asked one last time. She didn't answer. She gripped the pen until her knuckles went white. The fluorescent light above her buzzed faintly, like something dying. The room smelled of old paper and quiet judgment. Then she signed, Emma Whitfield, heiress to the Whitfield Group, daughter of one of the oldest fortunes in the state, had just married a man in worn-out boots and an oil-stained jacket. She heard the stifled laughter behind her, felt the weight of every gaze in that gray government office, pressing into the back of her neck like a thumbtack. She's lost her mind. Poor thing. What did they threaten her with? But then, just as the man beside her reached for the pen, every phone in the room began to vibrate at once. A tremor moved through the small crowd. People reached into pockets, glanced at screens, and their expressions shifted. Confusion. Disbelief. Alarm. The markets had moved. Something enormous had just happened in the financial world. A name obscured for a decade, buried beneath shell companies, and deliberately erased headlines had resurfaced. Emma did not look at her phone. She looked at the man beside her, at the calm set of his jaw, at the steadiness of his hand as he signed. He signed his name, Daniel Hayes, without hesitation, without theater, without even a flicker of expression. Then he capped the pen and set it down with perfect quietness. Emma didn't know it yet, but the man she had just been forced to marry was the reason every phone in that room was ringing. The Whitfield Group had been Emma's inheritance and her prison in equal measure. She had grown up understanding two things: that her family's name carried tremendous weight in this city, and that the price of carrying it was total obedience. Her father, Gerald Whitfield, was not cruel in the way of monsters. He was cruel in the way of architects, precise, structural, convinced that every wall he built was for someone else's protection. It was a Tuesday in March when he called her into the library. She had been living in the family's East Wing apartment since her return from London, where she'd spent 3 years building a small but genuine career as a financial analyst. She'd been good at it, better than good, but Gerald had summoned her home 6 months ago with a single sentence: "The company needs you here." And Emma, who had never entirely broken free of the gravity of that house, had come. The library smelled of leather and lemon polish. Her father sat behind his desk. Her stepmother, Patricia, stood at the window with her arms folded, looking out at the garden as though none of this required her direct attention. Emma's uncle, her father's younger brother, Clifford, sat in the armchair in the corner, swirling a glass of something amber. "Sit down, Emma," her father said. She sat. He told her the truth without preamble, which was his version of mercy. The Whitfield Group was not simply struggling, it was collapsing. 3 consecutive failed investments, a leveraged acquisition that had gone badly wrong, and a quiet but devastating withdrawal of a major institutional partner had left them exposed in a way that years of reputation could not paper over. In 6 weeks, unless something changed, they would be forced into a structured bankruptcy. Emma listened. She felt the floor shift slightly beneath her feet. "There is one solution," her father said. She had not expected what came next. There was a man, a creditor, indirectly, through a chain of holding companies who had agreed to extend a critical lifeline to the Whitfield Group, not in exchange for equity or repayment terms, in exchange for something else. A marriage. Emma stared at him. "His name is Daniel Hayes," Gerald said. "I know what a transactional marriage is," Emma said, her voice flat. "I'm asking why you think I would agree to one." "Because the alternative," Clifford said from the armchair, not looking up from his glass, "is that all of this goes away. The company, the apartment, the foundations, the staff, all of it." Patricia turned from the window. "We're not asking you to love him, Emma. We're asking you to be practical." "Who is he?" Her father's pause was almost imperceptible. "He's a single father, a local man. He has a daughter. He lives simply." "He's poor," Emma said. "He's modest," Gerald said carefully. "He's poor," she repeated. "That's what you're telling me. You want me to marry a man with no money to save a company that has no money." "The arrangement has been made," her father said. "The paperwork is prepared." She looked at the 3 of them. At her father's studied composure. At Patricia's careful blankness. At Clifford's glass. "The price to keep all of this," she said slowly, Is me. No one corrected her. The registrar's office was small and echoless, and smelled of old paper. Daniel Hayes was already there when Emma arrived with her aunt as witness. He was taller than she'd imagined, lean, with dark hair that needed cutting, and a jaw that carried a day and a half of stubble. His jacket was clean, but visibly old. His boots were worn at the heel. He held his hands loosely at his sides. He looked at her when she walked in, not with hunger, not with triumph. Not with the cautious hope of a man who knew he was receiving something above his station. He looked at her with a kind of careful steadiness, like a man who had already decided how this day was going to go and had made his peace with it. She did not speak to him before the ceremony. She barely looked at him. Are you sure? The pen, the signature. The laughter she didn't turn around to face. And then it was done. Daniel Hayes lived 20 minutes from the city center, in a neighborhood that had once been working class and was now in the ambiguous middle stage of someone else's gentrification. The houses were small, the trees were large and old. The street was quiet in the particular way of places where people actually live their lives rather than performed them. His house was a 1940s craftsman bungalow with a green front door and a porch that sagged very slightly on the left. The garden was not manicured. A bicycle leaned against the side fence. Wind chimes made of driftwood and sea glass hung from the eave of the porch roof. Emma stood at the front gate with her single rolling suitcase she had packed as though for a 2-week trip, because she had not allowed herself to think beyond that and looked at the house for a long moment. Daniel unlocked the front door and held it open. She walked in. The inside was small and without pretension. The ceilings were low. The floors were original hardwood, worn to a warm honey color. The kitchen was visible from the front door, a yellow kitchen, with copper pots hanging from a rack and a fruit bowl on the counter, and a child's drawing held to the refrigerator with a magnet shaped like a lobster. It was clean. That was the first thing Emma noticed, and she hated that it surprised her. The second thing she noticed was the girl. She appeared from the hallway, 8 years old, small for her age, with her father's dark hair and an expression of absolutely unguarded curiosity. She was wearing a t-shirt with a diagram of the solar system on it, and she was holding a book about deep-sea creatures. She looked at Emma. Emma looked at her. "Hi," the girl said. "Are you going to live here now?" "Lily," Daniel said, quiet but not sharp. "Yes," Emma said, "for now." Lily considered this with the focused seriousness of someone filing information carefully. Then she said, "Do you want to see my room? Maybe later." "Okay." Lily looked at her father. "Dad, she's pretty." "I know," Daniel said. Emma looked away. In the days that followed, Emma mapped the geography of the house and its rhythms as though she were a spy cataloging a foreign territory. Daniel woke at 5:30. She could hear him not clearly, but in outline moving quietly through the morning. By the time she came out at 7, coffee was already made, and there was food, eggs, or toast, or fruit, whatever was in the house. He never announced it. He just left it there. She ate it because she was hungry. He was a mechanic. He worked at an independent garage 3 blocks away. The kind of place with a hand-painted sign and a parking lot that smelled permanently of motor oil. He left each morning at 7:15. He returned at 6. On Tuesdays, he picked Lily up from school early for her swimming lesson. On Thursdays, he helped with something at the school she gathered. It was a science club. He did not ask Emma for anything. He did not impose his schedule on hers. He did not explain himself. She found this, in its own way, more unsettling than hostility would have been. One evening, she came home to find her heels, a pair of Italian leather pumps she'd worn to a meeting, scuffed badly on the left one where she'd caught it on a curb sitting by the door. Repaired, the scuff invisible, the leather buffed, she picked them up and examined them. She said nothing about it at dinner. He said nothing about it either. Lily was talking about a documentary she'd watched at school, about hydrothermal vents at the bottom of the ocean. There are creatures that live there that don't need sunlight at all, she said, with the evangelical conviction of someone recently converted. They just use chemicals from the rocks. They've been living down there for maybe 1 billion years. 1 billion years, Daniel said. Maybe, the scientists think. Dad, Could something live at the bottom of our ocean that we haven't found yet? Probably. Probably yes, or probably maybe? Probably yes. Lily looked satisfied. She looked at Emma. What do you think? Emma paused. I think the ocean is mostly unexplored. There are species discovered every year. Lily stared at her. Do you like the ocean? I don't know it well enough. We could go sometime, Lily said, with the magnificent unself-consciousness of a child who does not understand that some things are complicated. Dad takes me to the coast sometimes. There's a tide pool place. Emma looked at her plate. Maybe. She did not say no. That was the first time she didn't say no. Emma was not a woman who ignored incongruities. It was what had made her good at financial analysis. The ability to look at a balance sheet and feel, in some pre-verbal way, that something was wrong before she could articulate precisely what, a number in the wrong proportion, an assumption that didn't hold. A structure that looked solid from one angle and showed its fracture from another. She began to feel that sensation around Daniel Hayes about 3 weeks into their arrangement. It started small. She'd been on a video call with a colleague, a former colleague, now. Her work in London had not survived the move home, and she had been trying to rebuild some kind of consultancy practice from the Whitfield family's network. The call was about a real estate investment trust that was being restructured, and she'd been going back and forth on the merits of a particular debt equity position. She hadn't realized Daniel was in the kitchen until the call ended. She came in to refill her coffee and found him washing dishes, apparently unbothered. Sorry, she said. Was I loud? No. She poured her coffee. The swap structure they're proposing, he said, without turning around, only works if the underlying yield assumptions hold. If their cap rate projections are off by more than 40 basis points, the whole thing reverses. She turned to look at him. He was rinsing a glass. He didn't look up. She stopped. That's a very specific observation. You were talking loud enough, he said. Where did you learn about cap rates? He set the glass on the drying rack. Read it somewhere. She watched him for a moment. He dried his hands on a dish towel and left the kitchen. She stood there with her coffee going cold. 2 weeks later, a phone call. She came in from the garden. She'd started taking her morning calls outside because the light was better and the air helped her think, and found Daniel on his phone in the hallway. He spoke in a low, unhurried voice. She caught fragments. The Singapore position. I said, hold it. Don't touch it until I say. The Harris acquisition, no. Walk away. The liabilities aren't priced in. Tell them, I'm not available. I won't be available. They know why. He hung up as she came through the door. He looked at her without expression. Work? She asked. Yeah, he said. He went to the garage, put on his coveralls, and drove to the shop. That afternoon, she pulled up the financial news on her laptop and searched for the Harris acquisition, a mid-sized logistics company that had been the subject of a bidding war for the past month. By 6 o'clock, the frontrunner had withdrawn. By morning, the deal was dead. She sat very still in her home office and thought about a mechanic in the hallway telling someone to walk away from an acquisition that subsequently collapsed. She thought about the cap rate remark, about the repaired shoes, about the yellow kitchen and the lobster magnet and the driftwood wind chimes. Things that don't fit, she thought. She did not confront him, not yet, but she began to pay attention in a different way. The attack, when it came, was surgical. Emma learned about it on a Wednesday morning. A coordinated campaign by a competitor. A holding group led by a man named Preston Hale, who had been circling the Whitfield Group's weakened position for months, had resulted in the sudden withdrawal of 3 remaining institutional creditors. By noon, the company's credit facilities had been suspended. By 3 in the afternoon, her father was calling her in a voice she had never heard from him before. Thin, scraped clean of composure. It's over, he said. She didn't tell him not to say that. She wasn't sure he was wrong. She spent the rest of the day on calls that went nowhere, emails that received no response, and a series of conversations with lawyers who spoke in careful language that meant, there is no clean path forward from here. By evening, she had stopped trying to think of solutions. She sat in the living room of the small bungalow Daniel was picking Lily up from swimming. They'd been delayed, She had the house to herself and allowed herself, for the first time in years, to simply be frightened. The Whitfield Group had its failures and its cruelties and its architecture of control. But it had also been, in some foundational sense, the structure beneath everything. Without it, her father would have nothing. Patricia's carefully maintained world would dissolve. The foundation's charitable programs, which were, she had to admit, genuinely good, regardless of how they were used socially, would end. Hundreds of people who worked for the company would be displaced. She put her face in her hands. She heard the front door. She looked up, composed herself quickly, or tried to. She knew her eyes were red. Daniel came in first. He saw her face. He didn't say anything immediately, which she was grateful for. Lily ran past him toward her room, already narrating something about a butterfly kick to no one in particular, and the house filled briefly with the noise of a child existing loudly in a small space. "Bad day," Emma said. It wasn't a question. "Do you want to talk about it?" he asked. "No." He nodded. He went to the kitchen. She heard him moving around. After a while he came out with 2 mugs of tea, not coffee, which she usually preferred. But somehow tea was what the moment required, and he sat in the armchair across from her and didn't say a word. They sat like that for 20 minutes while Lily's voice drifted from her room, explaining something at length to her stuffed animals. Emma didn't cry. She came close, but she didn't. "It's going to fall," she said finally. He wrapped both hands around his mug. "Sometimes things fall. The company, my family's company, everything my grandfather built. Is the company what you wanted?" he asked. She looked at him. "What? Is it what you wanted, or is it what you were supposed to want?" She didn't answer. She wasn't sure she knew the answer. He didn't push. She slept badly that night. She woke at 4 in the morning to find the house dark and quiet. She went to the kitchen for water and noticed, through the window, that Daniel's truck was gone. She stood at the window for a long time. In the morning, the news came. An anonymous investment fund operating through a Luxembourg-registered holding entity, with no public-facing directors, had moved quietly but decisively into the Whitfield Group's position. It had bought out the withdrawn creditors at a premium, restructured the remaining debt, and extended a full operational bridge to the company. No conditions had been publicly stated. The Whitfield Group was saved. No one knew who had done it. Emma sat at the kitchen table with her coffee and the news open on her laptop, and she looked at the seat across from her, the empty seat where Daniel Hayes ate his breakfast every morning, and felt something cold move through her. The Hartwell Foundation annual gala was the kind of event that Emma had attended every year since she was 16. It was held in the ballroom of a hotel that had been old when her grandmother was young. And it attracted exactly the kind of people who measured their worth in the size of their table and the label of their suit. She had tried to avoid going this year. She had tried 3 separate excuses, but her father had been specific. Her absence would be read as a sign of weakness, and the company could not afford more of those just now. She hadn't planned to bring Daniel. He had offered. She had looked at him, at the coveralls he'd just taken off, at the grease-dark crescent under one thumbnail that wouldn't quite wash out, and she'd said, without thinking, "You don't have to." "I know," he'd said. "Do you want me to come?" She had thought about walking into that room alone. About the questions, the looks. "Yes," she'd said, surprising herself. He wore a dark suit. She didn't know where it had come from. It was well cut, which surprised her, though she tried to tell herself it shouldn't. He said nothing about her dress, which was floor-length and navy blue, and had taken her 40 minutes to decide on. He simply looked at her when she came out of the bedroom and said, "Ready?" She was not ready. The hotel lobby was full when they arrived. Emma recognized faces immediately: board members, old family friends, competitors wearing the masks of colleagues. She felt the eyes find her and then, with subtle but unmistakable curiosity, slide sideways to the man beside her. The first incident happened at the coat check. A security staffer, young, self-important, in a rented tuxedo, stepped into Daniel's path. "Sir, can I see your invitation?" Daniel reached into his jacket pocket. Emma, half a step ahead, turned back. "He's with me," she said. "Of course, Miss Whitfield." The man stepped aside. but not before he'd made the assessment visible on his face. The second incident happened at the cocktail hour. A man named Garrett Weston, the kind of man who had never distinguished between networking and hunting, spotted them from across the room and made his way over with the easy confidence of someone who had never needed to be invited anywhere. Emma. He kissed her cheek. His eyes were already on Daniel. "And this is?" "My husband," Emma said. Something crossed Garrett's face. He recovered quickly. "Of course," I heard. He extended a hand to Daniel. "What is it you do?" "Mechanical work," Daniel said. "Ah." Garrett's smile did not shift. "Well, good for you." He drifted away. The third incident was the one that changed something. A man she didn't know, heavyset, expensive watch, the air of someone whose wealth was recently enough acquired to still feel like a costume, stopped beside Daniel near the bar and looked him over once. Slowly, the way you look at something you're deciding whether to touch. "You're the mechanic," the man said. "The one she married." Daniel looked at him without expression. "Yes." "You drove the car here too?" He laughed, a sound designed to be heard. And it was heard by the small cluster of people nearby. "Or did you just park it?" Emma heard it from 3 feet away. She had spent her whole life navigating rooms like this. She knew exactly how to smooth something over, how to turn away, how to redirect, how to protect everyone, including the person being insulted, from the indignity of a scene. She stood very still. Then she stepped forward and put her hand through Daniel's arm. "Actually," she said, clearly, into the small radius of people who had registered the exchange, "he's my husband, and if you'd like to keep your invitation to next year's event, I'd suggest remembering that." The man blinked. The cluster of nearby guests found other things to look at. Daniel did not react, not visibly, but she felt, through the light pressure of her hand on his arm, something shift. A long exhale, almost invisible, like a man who had been holding something for a very long time and had, just slightly, let it go. Later, in the car she drove, which had become their habit, though she'd never commented on it, she stared at the road and said nothing for a long time. "You didn't have to do that," he said. "I know. Thank you." She changed lanes. The city lights smeared orange across the wet pavement. "I'm sorry," she said, "that I didn't do it sooner." He didn't answer. But he didn't look away from the window either. That was the first real moment, she thought. That was where it started. She was not, by nature, someone who left things alone. The Friday after the gala, while Daniel was at the garage and Lily was at school, Emma sat down at her desk with her second cup of coffee and her best research instincts and started pulling threads. Daniel Hayes. The name was not entirely absent from the internet. There were just the right number of records, public records. The kind that anchor a person to the world, but the deeper you dug, the stranger it became. Tax filings, a business license for the garage, registered 6 years ago. A school enrollment record for Lily. A previous address in a different city. Before that, almost nothing. A gap of almost 3 years. And before the gap, she almost missed it. The article was buried in an archive, behind a paywall, from a financial journal she had to log into with her old analyst credentials. It was dated 11 years ago. The headline read, "Hayes Capital Partners CEO disappears from public life, leaving behind 7-figure mystery." She read it 3 times. Daniel Alexander Hayes, age 29. At the time of the article, founder and CEO of Hayes Capital Partners, a venture and private equity firm that had, in less than 4 years of operation, it generated returns that had drawn comparisons to the early careers of the most celebrated investors in the country. The article estimated that at the time of his disappearance from public life, the entities he controlled directly and through proxies represented somewhere between $3 and $5 billion in capital. He had walked away. No announcement, no press release, no regulatory filing beyond the bare minimum. He had transferred operational control of everything, installed an independent board, established a trust structure of exceptional complexity, and vanished. The article speculated burnout, mental health, a personal crisis. There were hints, carefully worded, of a betrayal someone close to him, someone in the upper management of his own firm, who had acted against him in some significant way. The details were not public. The legal proceedings, if there had been any, had been settled quietly. He had walked away from billions of dollars, and he had built a life in a bungalow with green front door and driftwood wind chimes, and a daughter who loved the deep sea. Emma sat back in her chair. She thought about the phone call she'd overheard. The cap rate comment. The anonymous fund that had materialized overnight to save her family's company. She thought about worn-out boots, repaired shoes, 2 mugs of tea on a night when everything was falling. She thought about the question he'd asked her. Is it what you wanted? Or is it what you were supposed to want? She closed the laptop. She sat there for a long time, thinking about what it meant to choose smallness on purpose. To earn the right to be ordinary. To protect a child from a world that had used you in every way available to it. She thought about her own reasons for marrying him, the coercion, the obligation, the absence of any other road. And she felt, for the first time, a very deep and very uncomfortable shame. The Global Capital Forum was held once a year in a glass and steel tower in the financial district. And Emma attended because one of the Whitfield Group's institutional partners had asked her specifically, and because she was trying to demonstrate that the company still had leadership that showed up. She didn't expect Daniel to be there. She didn't expect the conference to be in its upper tier. Behind the credentialed access floor organized around the keynote appearance of a figure identified only in the program as founding partner, HCP Holdings. She didn't put it together until she was already in the elevator, going up. The doors opened on a wide, high-ceilinged space, arranged with the spare precision of an event designed for people who don't need to be impressed. No red carpet, no ostentatious floral arrangements, just clean sight lines, intelligent lighting, and a room full of people who controlled, collectively, a significant percentage of the capital that made the world move. Emma took a glass of water from a passing tray. She found her seat near the center of the room. She looked at the empty podium. The lights shifted. The room quieted. A door to the left of the stage opened. Daniel walked in. He wore a suit she had never seen before, dark charcoal, perfectly constructed, the kind of thing that disappears on a body because it fits too well to announce itself. His hair was the same. His jaw had the same cast. His hands moved the same way, unhurried, settled. He carried nothing, but the room rose to meet him, not literally. No one stood. But something moved through the assembled guests, like a tide shifting direction. Chairs straightened. Heads turned. Conversations ended mid-sentence. Emma's water glass, which she had raised halfway to her lips, stopped there. He reached the podium, lily-eyed at the room. His eyes moved across the space with the calm of someone who had stood in rooms like this before and found them unremarkable. Then his eyes found hers. She didn't move. Neither did he. A half-second. The length of a heartbeat. Then he looked away and said, into the microphone, with the exact same quiet composure he used to tell Lily that, yes, probably, something lived at the bottom of the ocean. Let's begin. Emma sat through 40 minutes of the most precise and quietly devastating analysis of global capital flows she had ever heard from a living person. Around her, people who moved markets for a living were writing in their notebooks. Some had their recording devices out, which was against the protocol stated on the door, and no one was being stopped. Afterward, as the room restructured itself into conversation, she did not move toward him. She waited. He came to her. Emma, he said. Daniel, she said. They stood about 3 feet apart. The noise of the room moved around them like water around 2 still stones. How long have you known? He asked. A few days, she said. I found the article. He nodded. He looked at the floor briefly, then back at her. I was going to tell you. When I was sure it was safe. Safe for who? For Lily, he said simply. For the life we built. She looked at him. At the same face she'd looked at across a breakfast table for weeks. Across a dinner table, in a car, in a hallway. The same face she'd dismissed and assessed, and only recently begun to actually see. I didn't know, she said. When I married you. I didn't know. I know, he said. That's not, she stopped. Started again. That's not the only thing I want to say. I know that too, he said. But this probably isn't the place. Around them, people were beginning to look. Curious. Calculating. Reading the body language of the man they'd all just watched. Command a room. And the woman standing close to him. Let's go home, he said. It was the first time Emma realized as they moved toward the door that she had thought of the bungalow with the green front door and the driftwood wind chimes as home. They drove home in silence. Lily was at a friend's house, a planned sleepover that now felt, to Emma, like it had been arranged by the universe to give them this exact window. Inside, Daniel went to the kitchen. She heard him filling the kettle. She stood in the living room and looked at the framed drawings on the wall. Lily's drawings, in a mix of crayon and watercolor. A whale, a volcano, a figure that was clearly meant to be her father, drawn very tall and very kind. She heard him set 2 mugs on the counter. She went to the kitchen. Tell me, she said. He leaned against the counter and looked at her with the same steadiness he always had. But without the armor now, or with less of it. I built the firm with 2 people, he said. My best friend from college and a woman I'd been with for 4 years. It was the 3 of us from the beginning. 5 years in, they moved capital out of client accounts into a vehicle they controlled. About 12% of the fund. It was done carefully. It would have been invisible to most auditors, but not to you, not to me. What happened? I dissolved the partnership, settled privately, paid back every investor from my personal holdings. Then I walked away. He picked up his mug. Lily was 2 years old. Her mother had left the year before. That's a separate story. And I had just spent 6 months watching 2 people I loved treat trust as a tool. I was done. Emma said nothing. I didn't want Lily to grow up in that world, he said. The world where money is the reason for everything, where every relationship is a position, where people smile at you and calculate you at the same time. He paused. I grew up comfortable. She grew up knowing exactly what she was worth to people around her, and it wasn't. He stopped. I just wanted her to have real things. A real life. Real people. Emma looked at the lobster magnet on the refrigerator, the crayon whale on the wall. And the arrangement with my family, she said. The marriage. He set down the mug. Your Uncle Clifford came to me. He knew who I was. He'd done business with one of my old partners years ago. He thought if he could structure a deal through the holding entities that was publicly associated with a nobody, it would be invisible to your family's competitors. He looked at her steadily. I didn't want it. I said no twice. What changed? He showed me your file, Daniel said. Not yours, the company's, the employment records, the people who would lose their jobs, the foundation's programs. A pause. And then he told me what they were going to ask you to do. Emma was very still. I said I would only do it if you agreed freely, he said. He told me you would. I didn't entirely believe that. I didn't agree freely. I know. I had no choice. I know that too. He looked at her directly. That's why I tried to make the house as livable as I could. I know I can't undo the circumstances. She thought about the meals, the coffee already made, the repaired shoes, the 2 mugs of tea on the worst night. You were trying to be decent to me, she said. Yes. Because you felt guilty. Yes. And because he stopped. Because? He was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was different. Not thinner, but more exposed. Because about 2 weeks in, I stopped feeling guilty and started just wanting to. Emma looked at him. I wanted to make the coffee, he said. I wanted to fix the shoes. I didn't do it because you'd been wronged. I did it because... He looked at her hands, then back up. You ate the eggs. You said yes to Lily when she asked about the tide pools. You defended me in that room even when you still thought I was nobody. You didn't have to. That was instinct, she said. I know. And instinct tells you things. Emma set down her own mug. She looked at the man across the kitchen from her, the man with the quiet voice, and the patient hands, and the daughter who saw things clearly and with great love. I was wrong about you, she said, from the beginning, in every way. You were working with what you had. That's generous. It's accurate. He almost smiled. You're not wrong about much, Emma. You just had the wrong data. She felt something move in her chest. Not the desperate, clutching emotion of someone who needed to be rescued. Something quieter, more durable. I don't know what this is, she said, between us. Neither do I, but I think I'd like to find out. Honestly, without the circumstances. He looked at her for a long moment. So would I. Outside, a car passed on the quiet street. The wind chimes moved faintly on the porch. Preston Hale did not accept defeat gracefully. It took him 3 weeks to identify the HCP holding structure and trace it back to Daniel. When he did, he moved fast, because men like Preston Hale were dangerous not in spite of their predictability but because of it. He did what he always did. He called in every favor, every leverage point, every buried piece of information that could be used as a weapon. He had someone on the inside of Daniel's old firm, a relic of the original betrayal, still carrying old resentments. Within 48 hours of being activated, that someone had fed a story to a financial news outlet. Allegations of securities violations in the original fund dissolution. Old accusations that had been privately settled and buried, now resurrected and reframed. The story went live on a Thursday morning. Emma found out at 7 a.m. when her phone began to ring. She read the article at the kitchen table while Daniel made Lily's lunch for school. She read it twice. Then she set the phone face down and looked at him. You know, she said. I know, he said. He sealed Lily's sandwich bag and put it in her backpack. It's not true. No. Do you have the documentation to prove that? Everything was preserved, he said. Every communication, every transaction record. My lawyers have had it archived since the settlement. She thought fast. Then the story dies the moment we release it. But they'll know that. Which means this isn't the real attack. This is the distraction. He looked at her. What else is Hale moving? She said. They spent the next hour at the kitchen table. Lily had been walked to the neighbor's house, who was driving carpool with 2 laptops open between them. Emma tracked the market movements. Daniel made 3 calls, short and direct, to people she now understood were not simply garage industry contacts. By 9:30, she had it. Hale was using the media noise to create a window. While the attention was on the securities story, his group was moving to acquire a 40% stake in one of the Whitfield Group's core operating subsidiaries from a minority shareholder who was being quietly pressured. Once he had that position, the Whitfield Group would face a governance deadlock, and Daniel's holding entities, which had become structurally linked to Whitfield's recovery, would be dragged into the dispute. He's not trying to destroy you, Emma said. He's trying to trap you. Force you back into the open. Make you fight publicly. Daniel looked at the screen. His jaw was set. If you fight publicly, Emma continued, you lose the life you built. Everything you chose. And if I don't fight, he said, it costs you the company. Again, she looked at him. Let me, Emma, let me handle the subsidiary block, she said. I know that shareholder, Theodore Marsh. We've met 3 times at various events. His daughter was at school with me for a year. She was already composing the call in her head, reading the angles. He's being pressured because he thinks there's no upside to loyalty. I can give him an upside. You'd be walking into Hale's crossfire. I know. He'll come after you personally. He can try. She looked at him steadily. You protected my family's company when I had nothing to offer you. She paused when I was treating you badly. You did it because it was right. Let me do one thing because it's right. Daniel looked at her for a long moment. Something moved behind his eyes. Okay, he said. She called Theodore Marsh at 10. By 11, she was in a car. By 2 in the afternoon, she was sitting across a conference table from a 70-year-old man who had built his stake in Whitfield's subsidiary through 4 decades of patient relationship building, and who was deeply, visibly uncomfortable with what was being asked of him. She didn't pitch him. She didn't negotiate. She told him the truth about the pressure campaign, about Hale's intentions, about what would happen to the subsidiary if it was absorbed into Hale's structure. And then she told him what she could offer. Daniel's holding entities would take a protective position in his portfolio, insulating 3 other assets he held from the market volatility that was clearly coming. She was offering him shelter in exchange for loyalty. He looked at her across the table for a very long time. "Your father," he said finally, "never once asked me for anything directly. Always sent someone." "I know," she said. "You're different." "I'm trying to be." He signed the lockup agreement at 3:15. Hale's position was blocked. By the time the financial news outlet received Daniel's legal team's response to the securities allegations, 600 pages of meticulously documented evidence, the story was already crumbling. By end of day, the outlet had issued a correction. By morning, 3 competing publications had run the real story. An attempt to destroy a legitimately operating investment entity through recycled, disproven accusations. Preston Hale made no public comment. He didn't need to. The silence was its own statement. Emma got home at 7:30. Daniel was in the kitchen. The lights were on, warm and yellow, and it smelled like something with herbs and garlic was in the oven. And Lily was at the table doing homework and explaining to a pencil, apparently why the giant squid was underrated as a species. Emma stood in the doorway for a moment before anyone noticed her. She thought, "This is a real thing. This is what a real thing looks like." Lily looked up. "You're back." "I'm back. Did you win?" Emma looked at Daniel, who was watching her from across the kitchen with an expression she hadn't seen on him before. Open. Unguarded, like a man who had spent years holding a door shut and had finally, carefully, let it swing. "Yes," Emma said. "We won." 3 months later. The bungalow had changed very little. The green front door was the same. The wind chimes still moved in the coastal air when the windows were open, which they often were now. The lobster magnet still held Lily's drawings to the refrigerator, though there were new ones, including one that, on close inspection, appeared to depict 3 people standing at the edge of a tide pool, 2 adults and a child, with a very large crab, visible in the water below. Emma had moved her office home. Not the Whitfield Group office she had accepted, reluctantly and honestly, a formal role in the company's restructured leadership, but her personal consultancy. The home office had a better window anyway. Daniel had built her a bookshelf along the south wall. He'd done it over 2 weekends, measured everything precisely, and said nothing about it being a permanent fixture. She had said nothing either. Some things did not need to be said out loud. The Whitfield Group was stable. Gerald Whitfield had retired gracefully, or at least as gracefully as he was capable of, and had ceded day-to-day control to Emma and a new board. Emma had insisted on restructuring the charitable programs first. Her father had objected. She had proceeded anyway. Patricia sent flowers when Emma's name appeared in a business profile. Emma sent a polite thank you card. Clifford, she hadn't spoken to directly. That was still complicated. It would remain complicated for some time. Emma was working on being okay with that. Daniel had not returned to the public life. He had made one statement through his legal team, following the Hale affair, that confirmed his identity and his continued operational role in HCP Holdings. It said nothing about his personal circumstances. It was calibrated precisely to give the minimum information necessary to close the chapter. He still worked at the garage 3 days a week. He had tried to stop, and had found that he missed it, the specific satisfaction of something broken becoming functional, of a problem that had a real solution. Emma had driven past the garage once, deliberately, on her way to a meeting. She'd seen him through the open bay doors, bent over an engine, in his coveralls, talking to a customer who was a young woman with a worried expression and an old sedan that had obviously become unreliable at the worst possible time. She'd watched him listen to the woman describe the sound the engine made, nodding, and then say something that visibly relaxed the woman's shoulders. Emma had sat in her car at the red light and felt something so acute and so quiet that she hadn't tried to name it. It was a Saturday in late June when she told him. Lily was at the tide pools with a neighbor's family, her first trip without a parent, which she had lobbied for with the focused determination of someone who had inherited her father's approach to getting what she was after. Daniel had agreed. Emma had made Lily recite the safety rules twice. They were on the porch. Late afternoon. The air had that quality it sometimes had in early summer. like the day couldn't quite bring itself to end. Emma was reading. Daniel was doing nothing in particular, which was something she had come to recognize as one of his real skills. The ability to be genuinely still without it being emptiness. She set the book down. "I've been thinking," she said. "Okay," he said, "about what I want. Not what the company needs. Not what my family needs. What I want." He looked at her. "I want to stay," she said. "Not because of any agreement. Not because of the circumstances. Because I choose to." He was quiet. "I want to be here," she said. "In this house. With Lily." She looked at her hands. "With you, Emma," he said. "I know it's not. I know things are still complicated. I know there's no clean way to separate what was forced from what became real. But I think—" She stopped. Started again. "I think what became real is more real than what was forced. I think that's true for both of us." He looked at her for a long time. "It's true for me," he said. "Then I'd like to try it," she said. "Honestly. From the beginning, more or less." Without the architecture of other people's decisions, he reached across the small distance between their chairs and took her hand. Not dramatically. Not with the weight of a gesture designed to be witnessed. Just a quiet, deliberate thing. His hand, warm and calloused and completely steady, closing around hers. She looked at their hands. She looked at him. "Okay," he said. Lily came home at 7, sunburned and ecstatic, carrying a jar with a hermit crab in it that she had been explicitly told she was not allowed to take home. She had taken it home anyway, with a detailed explanation ready that involved the crab appearing to be injured and therefore requiring observation. Daniel looked at the crab for a moment. "We'll talk about the rules," he said. But one night, Lily beamed. She set the jar on the kitchen table, then looked at Emma with the straightforward intensity she sometimes deployed without warning. "Are you staying?" she asked. Emma looked at her. At this small, serious, open-hearted person who had looked at her on her first day in this house and offered to show her her room. "Yes," Emma said. "I'm staying." Lily considered this. Then she nodded, with the air of someone whose assessment had been confirmed, rather than someone receiving surprising news. "Good," she said. "The crab's name is Copernicus." "Absolutely not," Daniel said. "He looks like a Copernicus. He doesn't look like anything yet. He's a crab." Emma laughed. It came out easier than she expected, fuller, less constructed. A real sound in a real kitchen, with a yellow wall and a fruit bowl and a jar on the table containing an illegally adopted hermit crab. Daniel looked at her when she laughed. He didn't say anything. But she saw it, the thing behind his eyes. The quiet, enormous thing. And she didn't look away. Later, after Lily was in bed and Copernicus had been relocated to the porch, with ventilation and fresh water, about which Lily had given very specific instructions, Emma stood at the kitchen window and looked at the dark garden. Daniel came to stand beside her. They were quiet together for a while, in the way they had learned, the way that meant something rather than nothing. "I thought I was going to lose everything," she said. "My family's company. The life I'd been told I was supposed to have. I know, and instead She stopped, looked at the garden. "I ended up here. Is that worse?" She turned to look at him. "No," she said. "It's the best thing that happened to me. I just didn't know that yet." He looked at her. Outside, the wind chimes moved the driftwood and sea glass, making their small, specific music in the dark. The man who had chosen smallness on purpose. The woman who had learned, for the first time, to choose. The child who had known, all along, that this was where the good things were. A house with a green front door. A jar on the porch. A crab named Copernicus, probably. Everything real. Everything chosen. Everything, finally, theirs.